Welcome to the AVRO Heritage Museum podcast. Our host today is again Chris Bezic from the Talking Newspaper. In this final episode of the AVRO Story, Chris is joined by Brian Frakes and Roger Yates, two dedicated volunteers from the AVRO Heritage Museum. They share their experiences and insights about the museum's mission to educate visitors about aviation heritage, the importance of accessibility, and how they cater to diverse groups, including schools and community organisations. Brian discusses the museum's outreach efforts, including a social responsibility fund to assist less affluent schools with transportation costs, while Ronnie highlights the importance of tailored experiences for different visitor groups. Join us as we celebrate the incredible work being done at the museum and the passion of its volunteers.
Welcome to the sixth and final episode of The Woodford Story. From me, Chris Bezic, with two guests today to bring our series to a close. Brian Frakes and Roger Yates represent the face of the AVRO Heritage Museum, two of the 135 volunteer workers who deliver the day-to-day operation for visitors. Brian, start us off then. How do you come to be a volunteer at this brilliant museum?
Okay, well, having had a career in education for 40 years, 20 years in the state sector with two headships and then another 20 years developing international schools overseas, I then retired, but I have been interested in aviation ever since I was a young 7 and 8-year-old. Used to come to the air shows at Woodford for many years. And then when I retired from teaching, I was looking for something to do, and I heard the museum were looking for volunteers. I came along and had a meeting with Roger Yates, the trustee, in charge of enlisting new volunteers. And I've been here now for 3 years. I was, before very long, Roger, who used to look after the school and youth group tours, saw that with my background in education, I was a worthy person to take over from him. So whilst there are 3 of us running tours, I am now leading on school and youth. A colleague, Trevor, he organises the adult tours, and Roger concentrates on community and corporate tours. But we work as a team, helping each other out on the different tours.
So a good museum has a mission and a purpose, and it thinks carefully about its visitors, doesn't it? So tell us a bit about how work is done to make sure that different groups get the right kind of experience in the museum.
Okay, well, first of all, being a primary specialist, although I did have experience in the Key Stage 3, 4 and 6 form when I was working overseas, I'm very interested and passionate about the young children, 3 to 18-year-olds, learning about the aviation heritage here at the museum. We have 100 years of aviation heritage. Started by a local guy, Mr. Elliot Verdon Rowe, born in Patricroft, 1887. And then another important person was designer Roy Chadwick, again born locally. And when children in Key Stage 1 learn about early flight, oh yes, they talk about the Wright brothers. We want them here to learn about Mr. Rowe and how he developed flying and aviation in Manchester. And in that respect, we like to make ourselves available to schools and youth groups. So we have school groups. We also have beavers at 6 and 7-year-olds coming. We have scouts, cubs, girl guides, and air cadet groups. Well, by the many, we're well known now with air cadet groups. We have them from Blackpool, Liverpool, West Kirby. I've got a group coming up from Oswestry, and we try to structure their visits in what they wish to have for their learning outcomes for their groups. So, the variety of skills we have, yes, we have middle-class schools from Leafy, Wilmslow and Bramwell, but we are reaching out to other areas of maybe less affluent areas. And with that in mind, we know that schools sometimes have a crippling cost of the coach. A school in Macclesfield recently wanted to come, but when the coach company wanted £400 for the coach, they couldn't do it. So what I'm working on at the moment, with the approval of the trustees, is to create a social responsibility fund, and this will be ring-fenced within the museum accounts, such that where schools, for example, have lots of pupils, attracting the pupil premium, or lots of homeless, or free school meals, if they can demonstrate that it is going to be tough for them to afford it, we will help subsidise the cost of the coach. That's in progress now, and I'm hoping that in the new year I'll have a significant fund available. Variety of schools. Yes, we have primary, we have secondary schools. We recently worked on a joint project with Titherington High School. They wanted assistance with their work celebrating the Dam Busters raid, well, as we would call it, Operation Chastise. Well, we had a very, very good display here of 30 storyboards, which with some students, we took them up to the school and put them in the school for them to display. We also have, we like to encourage schools with pupils with special educational needs and disabilities. They can get all sorts of things out of it, not just learning outcomes, but self-affirmation. For example, there's a school in Tameside, Ashley School. They are regulars. They come here each year. They send 4 or 5 students with their helpers, and believe you me, you would not recognise that those young adults had behavioural needs. When they get in here, they are transfixed. They are absolutely transfixed. So a variety of skills that we like to think we're open to. But yes, we're reaching out more to less affluent areas because how can we support these skills? Well, first of all, for the younger children, the very young children, just the experience of going in a cockpit is worthy in itself. But being educationalists, first of all, we always want the school leaders to come on a prior visit. We almost insist on that because we don't want it just to be a trip to a museum. So we come and we will discuss with them what learning outcomes they want and how we can satisfy those learning outcomes, and discuss a visit in detail. Then, as I mentioned earlier, Key Stage 1, well, they're talking about early flight, and yes, we want to talk about early flight here in Manchester, in the Greater Manchester area. Key Stage 2, Key Stage 2, we can support the schools, for example, in World War, issues to do with World War I or World War II, which are on their curriculum. Key Stage 3 and 4, well, there we are really getting into the STEM subjects, the science, technology, engineering and maths, but as educationalists we believe that permeates across the curriculum. So we would take a topic, Operation Chastise, the Dam Busters raid. We can talk about that with the science and engineering and maths that underpinned the operation itself. But then we can also extend that into the art and design. We can look at the plans from the archive and how these plans were drawn up. For example, how the bomb bay of the Lancaster was modified. We can then extend it as well into literacy areas, because there are lots of myths that have grown up around the Dam Busters raid. And as I say, Operation Chastise, that's why we like to refer to it by the proper name. And the bouncing bomb, well, it wasn't really a bomb at all. It was a mine, the Upkeep mine. And so we could do research in literacy to find out, distinguish between the myths and the facts. Indeed, there is a talk that Roger and I do for schools where we explore this issue of myths and facts. And then there's another issue you can go into in the spiritual, social and moral dilemma. A debate can be had about the issue of blanket carpet bombing, where civilians get killed as well as prisoners of war, as happened with the Operation Chastise. Civilians, prisoners of war were killed, and there's a moral dilemma, carpet bombing. Both sides were doing it, but let's have a debate about that. So we can actually reach across the curriculum and not just the science and engineering topics.
You mentioned earlier, Brian, when we were chatting, that some of these young people who come on these visits end up having a more permanent relationship with the museum.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example, and this is a fantastic example. 4 young ladies, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, came last year to do the Duke of Edinburgh Voluntary Awards. They enjoyed it so much, they ended up becoming youth members, and they are now regular helpers at weekends. They help in the museum, they help in the cafe, and they are fantastic. The number of people that start off, because I should mention that, Duke of Edinburgh, we have at least 4 or 5 people each year going for the Duke of Edinburgh Award. And so, yes, they come and they end up becoming welcoming youth members. We have a very flourishing youth membership now. We must have 10 to 12 youth members who come when they're available on Saturdays. We also have people doing work experience as well. And we can, when they come for work experience or for the voluntary ward, we don't just put them in a cupboard and say, go and help them tidy up the cupboard, which is what happens with some in some placements. When we do a Duke of Edinburgh work experience, we like to show them all around the museum. So, for example, we will show them what happens on a tour. They can accompany members in the cockpit tours. That's great. But they'll also see the caffeine working order. We'll also, Andy, the company secretary, will take them round with aspects involved in the facilities management of the school, how you manage the shop. So we like them to experience different aspects of how a museum operates. It's not just people coming through the door for the exhibits. There's a whole structure that has to be there to help the museum operate. And most recently as well, we're developing relationships with local secondary schools and Manchester University, involving the students in actively being involved in scientific and engineering projects, not just theoretical. Indeed, this afternoon I have a meeting with a teacher from a local school where we're going to talk about, first of all, he wants to have his students in the sixth form enlist for the Duke of Edinburgh, and also how we can get involved in engineering projects in the new year. And some of the members who are involved in those projects, they're most willing to have people come along. The youngsters in particular, because it's the youth that has to carry on this heritage.
Finally, Brian, this museum has an enviable reputation. Its name is mentioned, in high circles, and visitors love it. From the perspective of one of the 135 volunteers, what is it about the place that seems to make it rather special?
Well, as I say, you don't just have to be interested in education. It's surprising. For example, the Girl Guides group that came recently, they were buzzing on the bus on the way home. So much so that one of their leaders rang me up to tell me how much these girls had enjoyed the visit. And the leaders had enjoyed the visit so much, they ended up getting together and having a visit themselves. We even have a group from, I had a group from Bramwell Methodist Church group. Their Thursday afternoon group came. Their mobility issues ranged from mild to severe mobility, but we cope with it. We rearranged the museum. We are a very, very accessible museum in terms of how we manage the building. And they, for example, just wanted somewhere different to come on a Thursday afternoon, and they brought the sandwiches and cake, and we had a talk. We gave them a talk. It's the variety that you get involved in here. The group from near Northwich, Petty Pool, young adult learners with a variety of serious medical issues. Well, they came and they loved it. We adapt our tours to the needs of the group that comes, so much so that their leaders are now looking to have some of the students come on a regular basis on Tuesdays to help in various aspects of running the museum. So for me, it's the variety that you get involved in, and without doubt, you can read in our feedback book down below, downstairs on reception. The feedback we get is so positive. I have never had an adverse reaction from anybody, and that helps us enjoy it as volunteers. But for me, to sum it all up, Chris, I think this museum is here to educate, to get people to appreciate what's happened in aviation over the 100 years, to inspire them to maybe look to careers in engineering, whether you're a boy or a girl, to be inspired. When you look at some of the achievements of Elliot Verdon Rowe and Roy Chadwick, one of the greatest aircraft designers that's probably not well known at all, but went for designing biplanes in bits of wood and materials in 1910, 1912, through to the Manchester, the first aircraft with a retractable undercarriage, the Anson, going to design the Manchester and the Lancaster, and then indeed the Vulcan in the 40s. What a mind that man had. If you cannot be inspired by somebody like that, well, I don't know what can inspire you. So we're looking for the museum to preserve the heritage, but for them, the young people, to actually come and experience it and be the future of the museum.
Brian, thank you so much for leaving your reception desk and talking to us. It's really appreciate it. Thank you.
Been a great pleasure, Chris. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Let's turn to Roger now, who's been waiting very patiently next to Brian. I'm going to ask you the same question, Roger. I think I'm right that your original background, like Brian's, is education. So how do you go from that to ending up being a really active volunteer, at this amazing museum?
Well, first of all, I was introduced to the museum by a friend of mine when the museum actually opened and we had the fly past of the last flight of the Vulcan. He knew I was going to be retiring from my previous occupation and thought that I might like to get involved in the museum. I said, well, when I retire, I will think about it. The reason I was interested in the museum was because I had previously been involved in working with the Manchester Museum on Oxford Road, the University of Manchester Museum, Salford Art Gallery, and the new Lowry Gallery, which is over on Salford Quays. So I'd always been involved in museum education and gallery education. In addition to that, my father was in the Royal Air Force for 20 years, from 1938 to 1958. So I grew up with the Royal Air Force. I grew up with a love of the vocabulary, of the stories, of the aircraft themselves, of the background and the engineering. And so when I retired, I thought, well, I can't just let the week slide away in front of me. I can't sit at home and watch daytime TV. I've got to do something. It's worked out very well.
Sounds as though you're ideally placed. I hate that American expression. It's a bit of a no-brainer, wasn't it, really? We're going to talk mainly about your lead role, which is all to do with groups. Just before that, though, you are also a trustee, aren't you? Just tell us briefly, how does that work? What does that mean?
Right, well, I'd been at the museum for about a year and we hadn't really got any materials available for schools or colleges. We were having very few group visits and there was very little museum documentation as the museum hadn't been open very long. And they asked me to be a trustee. Initially, I said, well, I'm going to think about it. Eventually, I decided that I would be happy to become a trustee. In terms of the role of a trustee, it's very much like the school governor, being a school governor. You can interfere in the day-to-day running with the school, but it wouldn't necessarily be in the best interest. But you are there as a sort of gatekeeper, particularly as the museum is a registered charity. And we do have a responsibility as trustees for that. But as well as being a little bit like a school governor, we are here at the museum as trustees, very hands-on. In addition to being a group that do turn up and do shifts and do duty manager, we also get involved, if you like, as a team leader. So personally, my areas are group visits, which covers all the education and adult group visits, and also youth visits, such as cadets, scouts, brownies, and all the various other youth organisations. In addition to that, I also pick up museum accreditation, which means things like Visit England and National Museum accreditation, and corporate responsibility when people want to come and rent or hire parts of the museum for events or corporate hospitality. And I also pick up membership.
So I suppose the idea is that what you don't want is a one-size-fits-all approach. Groups come to visit the museum, they've got different needs, different interests, different backgrounds. What sort of things happen to make sure that that museum visit is a good experience, the best possible experience, it's meaningful, it's enjoyable? What sort of things are we talking about that might be adapted or a bit different?
Well, the first thing is, like most organisations, you've got to have a good team together. And I am fortunate that I've got my colleague, Brian, who's an ex-primary head and educationalist. I've also got Trevor, who's an ex-traffic police sergeant, and again is very well organised, as you would expect. So I've got a good team together. And in terms of trying to make the museum accessible and how we can manage to cater for different groups, originally started from the way that the museum was designed by the architect. We are a barrier-free museum, genuinely. And not only are we a barrier-free museum, but we've also got the displays and the presentations on a level. So they are at a level for people who have possibly mobility issues. They're also at a level for people who have various other issues, whether it would be aspects of difficulties in other areas. We've got a range of activities within the museum, but just before I come on to that, one of the first things we do when we get the possibility of a group visit is that what I ask my team to do is contact the organiser and talk the visit through. Ask them what they want to get out of the visit and say, how can we help? because I have to say that all groups are different. Whether it's New Mills Women's Institute, whether it's the University of the Third Age, whether it's ex-British Airways Pilots Association, all the groups are different. And so in order to make the museum accessible, we come at that from several different levels. We come at it from the display and presentation of the museum floor. All the displays and presentations and storyboards are colour keyed to the timeline, so it's an easy museum to interpret. We've got a range of QR codes, which if people have got the code reader on their phone, can get audio and also visual. And we've also got a number of interactive exhibits, such as the virtual reality bombing raid to Berlin. And even if people have got visual difficulties, we don't have a single problem with audio, and it's a really interesting exhibit. So that's something that can be looked at on a very straightforward level. We've got another range of interactive exhibits, such as the Nimrod submarine hunter, where you can go out and you can give Commander Ivanov a bad day at the office. We've got the flight simulator, and we've got, of course, the cockpit. Now, one of the things about the cockpits is they are very atmospheric. What we do find is that people get a lot of enjoyment from understanding and looking and feeling and touching the way the cockpits are organised. So it's coming at it from a whole range of different levels. We can accommodate a large group up to 30 people, but we'll also depending on the particular group, have as few as 5 or 6.
Looking in the visitor's book, I noticed that it wasn't all that long ago, I don't think, a group of blind veterans visited the museum. I don't know whether you remember that, but perhaps you could talk us through what sort of things would happen in the case of that specific example to make that visit go well.
Well, as I said sort of previously, one of the big things about the museum is it's a very sensitive and sensory experience. Just before I touch on that, not that long ago, we had a group of people, mainly ladies, I have to say, of a certain age, that came from a care home. It was a dementia care home. And I'll tell you now, they were not looking forward to the visit at all. But as soon as they got into the museum, it became a memory box. The smell, the touch, the sights and the music that we used took them back to their early years when they were 16, 17 or in their 20s, and they were involved in working at Woodford as part of the wartime aeronautical industry. And whilst they probably couldn't remember what they'd had for lunch, they certainly remembered how many rivets they put in a Lancaster, or the ticks and the boxes for quality control, and they were telling me how to use a capstan lathe. So it became, as I say, I've used the phrase, a memory box. And that's what we found with some of our veterans, that although some of them were partially sighted, some of them were totally blind, it did not seem to take anything away from the visit, because the sensory aspects, touch and smell, the smell inside the cockpits is real. And if you go in a VC-10, it smells totally different from the Vulcan. The Vulcan is different from the Lancaster. The Lancaster's different from the Nimrod. Also, the layout of the cockpits. People can easily be guided into all the seating arrangements within the cockpits. Once you're there, it's a bit like literally using what the Royal Air Force refers to as the blind flying controls. You fly with your hands, you fly with your feet, you fly with your senses. You don't fly with your eyes. So it became really quite an interesting visit, and many of the members were picking up so much from the atmospherics of the cockpits. In addition to that, what we also do is we also have handling displays. So we have a range of handling equipment that we actually lend out to schools, so they can try on a helmet, the bone dome as it was called. They can use a field telephone. They can look at the astro compass from a Lancaster. They can try on a parachute. So there's a number of things like that actually make it real. In supporting of that as well, we also have audio cockpit descriptions, which are on our website, but can easily be accessed into our Lancaster room. And so if we talk to the groups before, they can listen to the cockpit audio descriptions. We've also got some lovely BBC sound recordings. We have one of our members who puts together Cold War podcasts, and we've also been involved in oral history recordings by members of our team. So, for example, one of our members, Richard, would tell you about flying the VC-10 as part of the Queen's flight. Another of our members would talk to you about the bombing exercises they did with the United States Air Force over in California and flying a Vulcan down the Grand Canyon. These are the things that I feel make the museum come alive.
Well, having spent quite a lot of time over the last 5 months now putting things together for this series of programs, I can only urge people to actually come and visit. It is an absolutely amazing museum. Roger, before we say cheerio, just give us one or two of the nuts and bolts, would you, to alert people to, when you're open. Are you open all year? Where it is, how much it costs, anything like that you think might be worth just sharing now?
Right. Well, for a start, we are open 5 days a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays are reserved for group bookings. Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we are open to the public. And generally speaking, we don't encourage group bookings on public days because we don't feel the groups would really get the best benefit having to share the museum with the general public. However, never say never. What we advise the group organiser to first of all get in touch with our team, whether it would be myself or whether it would be Trevor, Brian, and talk to them about what they think they would like to get out of the visit. Then we can talk it through, whether they would like an introduction to the museum in the Lancaster Room before doing the museum tour, whether they would like a museum tour, which cockpits they would like to visit and why, and what they want to get out of this. And in addition to that, we will talk them through the layout or the plan of the day. How long do they want to spend at the museum? Do they want a buffet lunch with it? All that can be arranged. All they need to do is tell us what we want, what they like, what they want, and we can deal with it all on their behalf. In terms of payment, we do have what we call mates rates, and so we do not charge veterans. We do not ever charge for carers, depending on the group size and the numbers and what they want. Never mind what it says on our website, talk to us, because all groups are different and we would like to be inclusive. And being inclusive is not about necessarily making it equal for everybody, but by making it different so everybody can get the best out of their visit. The area we are is on the old Woodford airfield. At the moment, it is in the middle of a housing estate situated in between Poynton and Wilmslow. We have got instructions on the website of how to get there. You can put in your sat-nav, although just be wary of that because cutting across two local authorities, Stockport MBC and Cheshire East, we actually have two postcodes. So just be careful on that. But all the instructions for joining the museum and the timings are on our website. The museum in general is open between 10 and 4 o'clock.
And finally, if people were not thinking necessarily of coming in a group, but maybe with their family and they were blind or visually impaired, if they wanted to ring up and ask a little bit in advance of the visit, bit of extra information, people would be happy to respond to that.
Yes, very much so. We do have people saying, my father is in a chair. Is that a problem? Or a mobility scooter? Or we are bringing somebody round. It's my son and he's on the spectrum. Is that okay? And the best thing is to talk to us. We've got a very informed membership. They know how we work. They know what we like to do, how we like to help. So again, if you want any advice about the visit or you want to talk to any of our team, please do that. If you phone up, you can talk to someone, or if you just go onto the website and contact us through the website with a question, that I promise you will be picked up and responded.
Roger, on that most positive and welcoming note, thank you very much for talking to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks to Brian and to Roger for rounding off this series for us. I know their schedules are very busy ones, so we're grateful for them taking time out to come and talk. And that's it for the Woodford story. More thank yous to the museum for commissioning this series, and to all the many participants in these recordings over the last 6 months who've shared their different stories. It's true that the past is not a good place to try and live in, but it's wonderful to revisit it from time to time. And talking in the episode before this one to people who worked at Woodford, you could hear in their voices and see in their eyes the affection they still hold for this site decades after they had left it. Perhaps they didn't always realise all those years ago, but they really were having the time of their lives. And they appreciate now how the museum is keeping those cherished memories alive and passing them on to future generations. Thank you for listening over the last 6 episodes. Until the next time, it's goodbye from me, Chris Beswick.
Make sure you follow us in your podcast app to ensure that you don't miss out on future episodes.